Check, 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 check. Check 1 2, check 1 2. Check, check, check. Check, check, check.
This hearing will come to order, and I want to welcome everybody to VA committee room to talk about the 2014 budget request for the Department of Veterans Affairs. As everybody already knows, this budget is a couple of months late. Comes after the House and Senate have both passed their respective budget resolutions, and I would just say that unfortunately it's a little late to influence the House and the Senate budgets that have already been passed, but I'm sure that we have appropriations and authorization work that is ahead of us, and so our oversight on this request is still very, very important. Mr. Secretary, thank you for being here. Welcome. As you know, committee members, and this is not on you, but committee members have had less than 24 hours to review some of the details associated with the budget request in advance of this hearing. It's likely, therefore, that we will have follow-up questions after we've had a chance to look a little bit closer at the details. I appreciate your attendance today and ask for your cooperation in getting timely answers to the committee so that we can move forward. My initial reaction to the budget is mixed. On the one hand, we see a proposed 4.3% increase in discretionary spending amidst what most would say is a stagnant or declining budget request for other agencies, most which have, unlike VA, had to absorb sequester cuts, and that demonstrates that VA funding is clearly a priority in a very tight fiscal climate. On the other hand, I'm concerned that we're not really seeing the results for the money that Congress has provided to VA over the last years. For example, the budget proposes a 7.2% increase for expanding mental health services. I'm still waiting, Mr. Secretary, for information from VA showing that veterans with mental illnesses are in fact getting healthier with the resources that we've provided. After all, I know that that's an outcome that you and this entire committee are both after. Dr. Petzl, I asked that question of you at our mental health hearing 2 months ago, and we are still awaiting a response. So would ask if you would help us in getting an answer to some questions. Then we get into the funding request for the Veterans Benefits Administration, which is a 13.4% increase over the current year. But I'm at a loss because we are seeing performance that doesn't match the dollars that have been put forward. Despite already high record investments in technology, record numbers of employees available to process claims, the situation is worse today than it ever has been before. When last year's budget was released, VA issued a press release saying that with the funding provided, and I quote, by 2013, no more than 40% of compensation and pension claims will be more than 125 days old. Here we are today, and we have 70% of claims out there that are older than 125 days. And the same is true for prior budget requests. What many of us would say are lofty promises, excitement about new initiatives and technology, but lackluster at best results, and we don't have what this committee would contend was a positive trend. VA has missed its own performance goal every single year, and I think most committee members here are really very tired of the excuses that we keep hearing from those that come before us to testify. Look, I understand that more claims are being filed and that those claims are complex, but that's been true for decades. We all know that. The workload created because of good decisions that you made for Agent Orange veterans, Mr. Secretary, Congress provided resources for an IT solution that you requested to help with that effort. And by establishing presumptions for combat post-traumatic stress and Gulf War illness, those claims, most of which would have been filed anyway, should have been easier to process, not cited as a contributing cause of the perennial failure As for technology improvements, I know many are pinning their hopes on the VBMS system, which we've already spent close to $500 million on. We've already had reports of VBMS problems from VA's Inspector General. We also have reports of the system crashing just this week because all raters were caused at that point to temporarily transition back to their old computer system. But what's worse, I've looked at the backlog numbers for the regional offices where VBMS went live at the end of last year, 2012, and 14 of the 18 offices have a higher percentage of backlogged cases now than when VBMS came online. The other 4 have seen marginal improvement, but it's nowhere close to what it needs to be if we're going to meet the goal of 2015 that you have established. I have been outspoken, as you know, in my efforts to protect VA funding, and we've worked for over a year to ensure that VA was, in fact, exempt from sequester. I've introduced a bill, along with the ranking member, to advance fund all of VA's budget to protect it from the effects of continuing resolutions or threatened government shutdowns. I'm proud of the efforts that this committee has made to protect the resources that are important to VA, but the point of those efforts is to ensure improved benefits and services to the veterans of this country. And right now, I am not seeing the improvement that I think most of us want to see in many key areas. I'm seeing the opposite. And, Mr. Secretary, I continue to say we have got to see results, and I'm sure you want the same thing. We need to see the outcomes the administration has promised with the resources that Congress has provided. No more excuses. I have supported you and your leadership up to this point. I believe that this committee and the Congress has provided you with everything that you've asked for, and it's time to deliver. So with that, Mr. Secretary, I will yield to the ranking member, Mr. Michaud, for his opening statement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Secretary, I'd like to thank you and your staff for being here today. I look forward to your testimony on the funding needs of the VA. And I'd also like to thank the VSO representatives who are also going to be testifying in the second panel. The committee has relied on the veterans community and the VSOs that are testifying next to provide additional insight into the needs of VA. You help us understand the pressing solutions facing our veterans and their families, but you also help us find solutions to the current problems that we currently have. And I especially appreciate the independent budget that you prepare as well. Mr. Secretary, I applaud the administration for providing a concrete example of the priority that our nation gives to our veterans. As you heard the chairman mention, in the time of austerity, a $2.5 billion increase over fiscal year 2013 levels represent the nation's ongoing commitment to those who have served and sacrificed. The key question today is, does this budget give you the resources that you need to complete your transformational efforts? The independent budget has recommended nearly $2 billion more than your fiscal year 2014 request. Many of your transformational initiatives will come to fruition in the next year and a half. This includes your goal of eliminating the VA claims backlog by 2015. So again, does this budget give you the resources that you need to complete your transformational efforts, specifically achieving elimination of the backlog in 2015? And if the answer is yes, well, I will definitely work closely with you and my colleagues on this committee and in Congress to get the resources that you need. I can remember sitting on this committee when I first got elected to Congress. We asked former Secretary Tony Principi whether or not he had the resources to provide the help that he needs for our veterans. He hesitated, and his answer was he requested additional $1 billion, but he'll live with what he received. So that's why it's important that we know whether or not you got what you asked for. To whom much, when you look at in the time of forced budget cuts and sacrifices within other agencies, you do have an increase. With these funds in these specific times come an increase in responsibility to show the tangible return on investment that we are investing in the VA. It is imperative that over the next year we have an open dialogue about the accomplishments and achievements that this funding will give you in your agency. There must be a robust discussion of the programs you are making moving forward, and particularly the transformation system. We need hard data and information if we are to share your confidence that the backlog will be addressed. This year you are asking for an additional $157.5 million in medical service funding. To me, this indicates the need for better and more detailed planning and programming. The process of putting a budget together and making informed policy and program decision is a fundamental management tool. And as we begin the discussion of providing advance appropriations for all of VA discretionary accounts, we need to also discuss whether the VA has the management processes and infrastructure in place to make strategic decisions that can inform budget estimates far into the future. I believe we would all like to see a planning program and budgeting process that is driven by the long-term strategic needs of the VA. All too often, VA has been working on a crisis-by-crisis mode. There's not that long-term vision, and I think we need that. And it should be one of the that also would assist VA leadership at the very highest level as well to make the tough and smart decisions to improve on how we provide benefits and services to veterans and to evaluate the successes or failures of efforts over the long haul. You have requested a large increase in informational technology as well. And I understand the critical nature of IT spending. This is especially important within the context of your transformational efforts, but I want to be assured that we are wisely spending IT resources. For example, as part of your proposed increase, you've requested $251 million to fund the required development activities within the IEHR Interagency Program Office. In light of the recent decision by DOD and VA regarding the integrated electronic health record, is this funding still required? And would these resources be better spent to support your claims backlog initiative? I would also like to mention, actually, in the administration proposal that actually I oppose to, is the administration budget includes a proposal to utilize what is called a change CPI in place of the current method of calculating inflation. The administration believes that the $44 million in savings over 5 years and $230 million over 10 years. I line up with different veterans groups and the Senate Chair of the Veterans Affairs Committee and our seniors to oppose this CPI change. I'm not convinced that it is a sounder manner in which to calculate inflation. Until I am convinced of that, I will be opposing it. I believe it would be a real damaging effort among many of our vulnerable citizens, including veterans and their families. So once again, Mr. Secretary, I want to thank you and the staff for your leadership. I know these have been very tough, difficult times as you go into the transformation, and look forward to working with you as you move forward over the next 2 years. Once again, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you very much to the ranking member. Our first panel this morning, we've got the Honorable Eric Shinseki, Secretary of the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. Mr. Secretary, your complete statement will be made a part of the record, and I will forego in introducing those you have with you at the table, and should you choose to introduce them, I would welcome that. You are recognized now, sir, and the clock is not running on you today.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Miller, Ranking Member Michoud, distinguished members of the committee, thank you for this opportunity to present the President's 2014 budget and 2015 advance appropriations requests for VA. We value your partnership, always have, and that will continue. your partnership and support in providing the resources needed to assure quality care and services for veterans. Let me also acknowledge other partners here today, our veteran services organizations, whose insights and support make us much better at our mission of caring for veterans, their families, and our survivors. Let me take the time, Mr. Chairman, to introduce members of the panel sitting with me. To my far left, your right, Mr. Steph Warren, our Acting Assistant Secretary for Information and Technology. Next to him is Todd Grahams, our Chief Financial Officer. To my right is Dr. Randy Petzel, our Undersecretary for Health. And to his right, Allison Hickey, our Undersecretary for Benefits. And then to the far right, Mr. Steve Murrow, our Undersecretary for Memorial Affairs. Mr. Chairman, thank you for accepting my written statement for the record. Let me just say very quickly, the 2014 budget and 15 advanced appropriations requests demonstrates the President's unwavering commitment to our nation's veterans. I thank the members for your own commitment to veterans as well and seek your support of these requests. The latest generation of veterans is enrolling in VA at a higher rate than previous ones. 62% of those who deployed on operations Enduring Freedom and Iraqi Freedom, Afghanistan and Iraq, have used some benefit or service from VA. VA's requirements are expected to continue growing for years to come, and our plan must be robust enough to accommodate that. We must be ready to care for them. The President's 2014 budget for VA requests $152.7 billion. As the Chairman indicated, $66.5 billion of that is in discretionary funding and $86.1 billion in mandatory funds. The increase of $2.7 billion in discretionary funds is 4.3%. As the ranking member indicated, above the 2013 level. This is a strong budget, which enables us to continue building momentum for delivering 3 long-term goals we set for ourselves roughly 4 years ago. Increase veterans' access to our benefits and services, eliminate the claims backlog in 2015, and end veterans' homelessness in 2015. These were bold and ambitious goals then. They remain bold and ambitious goals today. But our veterans deserve a VA that advocates for them and then puts muscle into the words. Access. Of the roughly 22 million veterans, more than 11 million now receive at least one benefit or service from VA, an increase of 1 million veterans in 4 years. That has been achieved by opening new facilities, renovating others, increasing investments in telehealth and telemedicine, sending mobile clinics and vet centers to remote areas where veterans live, using every means available, including social media, to connect more veterans to VA. Increasing access is a success story for us. The backlog. Too many veterans wait too long to receive benefits they deserve. We know this is unacceptable, and no one wants to turn this situation around more than the workers at our Veterans Benefits Administration. 52% of them are veterans themselves. We are resolved to eliminate the claims backlog in 2015 when claims will be processed in 125 days or less at a 98% accuracy level. Our efforts mandate investments in VBA's people, processes, and technology. People, more than 2,100 claims processors have completed training to improve the quality and productivity of claims decisions. More are being trained, and VBA's new employees now complete more claims per day than their predecessors. Processes. Use of disability benefits questionnaires, what we call the DBQs, online forms for submitting medical evidence, has dropped average processing times of medical exams and improved accuracy. There are now 3 lanes for processing claims. An express lane, about 30% of our claims go through that, for those that will predictably take less time. A special lane, special operations lane, if you will, for about 10% of the claims for unusual cases or those requiring special handling. And then the core lane where roughly 60% of the processing is done. Technology is critical to ending the backlog. Our paperless processing system, VBMS, Veterans Benefits Management System, will be faster, improve access, drive automation, reduce variance. 30 regional offices now use VBMS. All 56 will be on VBMS by the end of this year. Homelessness, the last of our 3 priority goals, is to end homelessness in 2015. Since 2009, we've reduced the estimated number of homeless veterans by more than 17%. The January 2012 estimate is the latest available figure, and that has the number at 62,600. There's more work to be done here, but we've mobilized a national program that reaches into communities all across the nation and partnered with the experts in those communities on dealing with homelessness. Prevention of veterans' homelessness is a major effort, and that'll be the follow-on major effort to the rescue mission which we have given ourselves till 2015. Mr. Chairman, we're committed to the responsible use of the resources you and this committee provide. Again, thank you for the opportunity to appear here today and for your support of veterans. We look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary, for your testimony. I'm going to start with a question that doesn't have anything to do with the backlog, but we'll get there. There's a witness in the second panel in their testimony from VFW that observes that major construction project backlog is upwards of $25 billion, and at the current rate it would take some 40 years to fully fund. This budget proposes $342 million for major construction, putting us on a course, I believe, for completion of all the projects in 70 years. So what I want to know from you, Mr. Secretary, what's the plan going forward in light of the severe funding restraints in this particular area? And do you think we need a strategic reassessment of VA's capital asset program going forward?
Mr. Chairman, let me just say the budget request that we've submitted is for construction is $2.39 billion for major and minor construction, NRM, non-recurring maintenance, and medical lease programs. These programs remain stable with an emphasis on providing safe, secure, sustainable, and accessible facilities for our veterans. Our minor construction request is for $715 million. It's an increase of 17% compared to 2013. The reason minor construction receives attention from us is it is the program that impacts more VA facilities and delivers services to veterans more quickly. Medical lease requests, $626.7 million, an increase of 12% compared to 2013. Allows VA to provide services closer to where veterans live. Major construction request is $342 million, as you indicated. With those funds, we intend to purchase 3 new national cemeteries in Central East Florida, Brevard County, Omaha, Nebraska, and Tallahassee, Florida. It also funds the completion of a mental health building in Seattle to replace the one that is seismically unsafe. In terms of non-recurring maintenance requests, $709.8 million remains stable compared to 2013. The request funds projects with safety, facility condition deficiencies, and other high-priority needs, and this is another one of those categories in which hospital directors can make quickest use of that kind of funding.
Mr. Secretary, I apologize, but my time is short, and I appreciate it, but I was talking specifically about the major construction.
Major? Okay.
And so that's the question. I mean, do we need to look at, the capital assets plan again? And we've discussed the issues on some leasing problems with CBOX. I see there's 14 in the budget this year. We've already got 12 plus 3 backlogged because of CBO and what they're requiring us to do in regards to an offset. But again, do we need a strategic reassessment of VA's capital asset program going forward?
Mr. Chairman, we have a process by which we review all of our construction projects. As I think you know, we created a construction review council that didn't exist before. We also have a process by which we strategically look at our capital infrastructure plan, and those reviews are ongoing. I would say that we do look at these closely, and I'm happy to share with you the results of those studies.
Okay, thank you. Let me real quick. The VA submitted a strategic plan to eliminate the compensation claims backlog. That plan was submitted in January of this year, in which it forecast expected numbers of claims it will decide in years 13, 14, and 15. And now, 3 months later, the budget assumes a lower number of claims will be decided. For example, the strategic plan assumed 1.6 million claims would be completed in 2014, but now the budget as it has been submitted assumes only 1.32 million will be completed. So I think this is consistent with my opening statement where I said we talk about bold predictions about performance year after year, but the results aren't backing up. And you know, my question is, it happens all the time. The goalposts keep shifting, and I'd like just as brief an answer as possible, because we will go to a second round of questioning and we'll talk about the backlog further. But why does the goalpost keep moving on one of the most important issues that are out there within the veteran community today, and that's the backlog?
Fair enough, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to call on Secretary Hickey to provide some detail. But I would say anytime you write a long-term, large plan that describes solving a complex problem, they are assumptions-based. And we rely on those assumptions being fulfilled, one of which is there are no additional complicators that get added to the workload. Another assumption is that we're going to be funded for the things we say we need. If either of those things change, it's going to change the workflow. I believe the plan that you are referring to, the common operating plan delivered in January, did not include VOW-VEI as part of that discussion. The current estimate does, and so there is an additional requirement that we've accommodated. I think you know, we can explain the difference in those two numbers. We have a resource plan now with submission of this budget, and I believe our latest estimates are accurate. Let me just see if Secretary Hickey has anything to add.
So, Chairman, we do create a plan, and then we look at our actuals. And I know that most of you all have individuals that are checking our weekly reports that we send to you through the Monday morning workload report or through Aspire. And I will tell you that we try to adjust for what we see in real life. And you will see right now there is a slight decrease in applications being made for claims compensation. Not a ton, but there's a little bit of a decrease. These are objectives we look at. These are estimates for the future in terms of past veteran behavior. We have to base you know, what we're looking at in the future in terms of what we are seeing and adjust for that year over year. So we will be making those adjustments on a regular basis, and as we start to see changes, we will certainly keep this committee and you up to speed on where we are.
Mr. Chairman, I'll just add as closeout here. I believe I'm correct that the COP you saw in January did not have VOW-VEI in it. This latest set of estimates does, and that's why you see an adjustment.
And Secretary, I've got a follow-up to that, but I'll do it in the second round. Mr. Michaud.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And once again, I want to thank you, Mr. Secretary, and your team for being here today and for what you're doing for our veterans. One of the issues, as you know, I've been a little skeptical of the 2015 backlog issue, and primarily because when you look at your plan that you put forward, I believe part of that plan also requires the Department of Defense to move forward, you know, in a different mode as far as being that seamless transition between DOD and the VA. And that's where the concern that I have. I know we have a new Secretary of DOD. My question to you is, have you had any recent discussions with the new Secretary of Department of Defense, and are they willing to move forward with that seamless transition, i.e., are they willing to accept the VISTA system that VA currently has? It's my understanding VISTA VA owns, VA operates. The DOD system is actually, I believe that they purchased that system, the Altria, I believe. I'm not sure. You'll have to correct me on that if I'm wrong. So is DOD willing to accept the VISTA system, and if so, how soon?
Thank you, Congressman Michaud. I would tell you that VA has decided that VISTA is our core system, and we're moving forward on the IEHR and still focused on an initial operating capability in 2014. And as you might expect, this has been a topic of discussion with the new Secretary of Defense, Secretary Hagel. He is getting into the discussion. It is a complex one. And he wants to be sure he's structured correctly. He and I have discussed this as recently as yesterday. I believe we're on the same path here, and that is to look to develop a single, common, joint, integrated electronic health record that's open in architecture and non-proprietary in design. And all of those terms are code word to get us to where we believe a seamless transition demands that we make the right decisions and the investments. Secretary Hagel is working this hard personally. I know that, and I look forward to our next discussion.
If they're not willing to accept it, what will that do towards the 2015 backlog issue that you're committed to breaking the backlog by 2015?
Sure.
If DOD doesn't do it?
Well, as a separate discussion, as we were building VBMS, the automation tool for benefits processing, we have also had a parallel discussion with other agencies, but primarily with DOD, because, as I've said before, very little of what we work on in VA originates here. Most of what we work on originates over in DOD. And so this partnership between not just our two secretaries, but our two departments, entirely important if we're going to have this seamless transition where all of our energies are focused on the focal point being the young individual serving the uniform and that individual coming to us as a veteran. That should be seamless. They shouldn't have to do anything about it. We should adjust. And so while we are talking about the integrated electronic health record, that is one piece of this larger discussion of a digital hookup with DOD. As we're developing VBMS, we've consulted with DOD and indicated to them that in 2014, when we are VBMS'd, we're looking for digits from them, and they are committed to working to make that happen.
Good. My last question actually deals with how you calculate claims. When you look at the VBMS, you can have a claim that might have 4 medical conditions. You could have a claim, actually I've seen some that actually has about 100 medical conditions. I think that's probably outside the norm, but see, normally if you have a claim that has 20 medical conditions, my concern is how do you really calculate it? How do you determine productivity among the employees by dealing with just a claim versus breaking it down to the medical conditions, which you could have several in one claim?
Let me call on Secretary Hickey here to just give us a short synopsis of the issue versus claims discussion, and then I'll look to close out.
Thank you, Congressman Michaud. You well noted that there has been a change in terms of what the content of a claim is. In the past, we might have found 1 or 2 medical issues inside of a claim. Our current veterans coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan are claiming at much higher levels, 12 to 15 medical issues per claim. What we have done here of late is we have taken the claim and our employees, and we are now capable of going down inside the claim and assessing how they do at the individual medical issue level, giving different points for claims that have more medical issues in it, so that the different complexity and workload associated with that claim meets, has an expectation for our employees of additional workload acknowledgement. I will tell you, as I look at the claim level quality versus the medical issue quality, which really was what a veteran cares about today, that veteran cares that we're doing his knee or his hearing well at that issue level. We are actually across the board, across the nation, at 95% on our quality when I look at the medical issue level of how we do a claim.
Just to close out, Mr. Michaud, you bring up a good point. You know, if you're dealing with a claim with 10 issues and you solve 9 of them and you're taking care of that veteran, but the one issue remains open, that claim is still unresolved. and yet 90% of it has been decided in favor of the veteran. So there is this distinction between getting 90% of your work done or just counting the claim and it's a 1 or 0 result. We need to be better at this and how we explain it, but we will do that with the help and insights and support of the VSOs who have a great experience here.
Mr. Bilirakis, you're recognized. 5 minutes.
Chairman. Appreciate it very much. Thank you, General, for testifying today. Thank you for your service to our country, and thank you for your commitment to our veterans. I'd like to elaborate on the process that the VA uses to reevaluate its projects that have already been funded. They've been appropriated. As you know, James A. Haley, the medical center in Tampa, the most highly trafficked VA polytrauma center in the nation, not only serves my constituents but also severely injured veterans across the nation. Years ago, officials at Haley developed a proposal that would allow them to build a brand new hospital in lieu of renovating their existing facility using major construction funding already appropriated to the location. If started now, the new hospital will save $500 million over 30 years, very significant, without interrupting current hospital operations, while better serving the future needs of our veterans. Yet the VA has not allocated funding for this cost-saving project. In fact, I noticed that the budget request that this proposal was a priority 78 with no funding requested. Why has the VA been reluctant to prioritize such projects? And I question if there are other similarly meritorious projects on the horizon when the timing is optimal to build a facility that will not only better serve our nation's veterans, but also will save hundreds of millions of dollars over time. What obstacles must the VA overcome to consider such projects and ensure taxpayers' dollars are used wisely?
Thank you for that question. Let me call on Dr. Petzl to provide some details here.
Congressman Bilirakis, let me give you the latest update on the Tampa project. As you know, originally the proposal was to renovate the bed tower. There's much other construction that was going to be new. We reassessed the situation at Tampa, and I believe that both the network and the facility have come to the conclusion that they really do need to build a new bed tower. A proposal to rescope that project is working its way now through central office, and when it's approved, we will then begin the process of evaluating that project. I believe there's enough money left so that we're not going to have to ask for additional money. It's a matter of just rescoping it, and that is in process.
There is enough money left and then some.
Right.
So I appreciate that. Can I follow up with you on this?
Certainly.
Please. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member. Secretary, first of all, let me thank you for your service to the country and to the Department of Veterans Affairs. As I look out in the audience and in the room, my first thought is whether we're doing all we can for the veterans. Since we enacted the Advanced Appropriation Policy 3 years ago, veterans' health care has not been the subject of the whims of the Congress, and for that I am very grateful. I want to thank the doctor for coming to Jacksonville to open up the clinic. As the Secretary said, the clinic is on steroids. It's probably one of the best clinics in the entire country, and that is we'll be able to do 90% of the procedures right there in this clinic. And I know that's the future of how we want to do outpatient clinics. I do most of my health care at Bethesda, and it would be good for every member to have an opportunity to go out there and visit, because the veterans that's there, their injuries are so different from what they was 20 years ago or 10 years ago. It's a lot more serious. When you say one issue, they have a multiplicity of issues. And what are we doing as a department to work with the local agencies to help deal with the problem that we have? I really don't feel that the veterans can do it by themselves. It's like the partnership we had down in Florida where we're working with Shands and the University of Florida. What are we doing to forge those relationships?
Take on the discussion of polytrauma.
Do you understand my question?
Let me try to answer it.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to ask Dr. Petzel to describe what we are doing, have done and are doing in establishing a polytrauma system of care.
Yes.
So that you're dealing, you see this end as military members who are severely injured. And by the way, today I think we have 6 quadruple amputees and just very, very difficult situations. What we have created in VA are 5 polytrauma centers that ring the country: Tampa, Richmond, Minneapolis, Palo Alto, and San Antonio. But this is where these patients are initially handed off from the military to us. Polytrauma, word we created to describe this serious injuries where it's not just one thing but multiple injuries. And then as part of that tiering is as they come through that first phase of stabilization, so they are not there forever. There has to be a second tier that moves them closer to home, third tier, and finally get them as close to home as we can. Let me ask Dr. Petzel to describe the effort here and then the numbers of facilities and people we have dedicated to this.
Congresswoman Brown, thank you, Mr. Secretary. As the Secretary described, it's a tiered system, begins with the very intensive 5 polytrauma centers. We have then 23 polytrauma network sites around the country, which would be the next level of care as a person moves closer to their community. And then we have 86 polytrauma support teams, so that when you put this together, most all of our medical centers have a polytrauma program that is relatively close to the individual's home. The goal here is always to deinstitutionalize people and to get them into their home. The 86 polytrauma support teams and then the other 39 polytrauma points of contact are really the connection that patient and his family has with the VA system and the VA medical care. We will do whatever we need to in order to support someone at home. It may be buying care in the community. It may be providing that care ourselves. But the goal here, again, is to return people into their community and into their homes.
Congresswoman, just take a second here. Our effort here in connecting VA's electronic health record system takes these 5 polytrauma centers as a priority, and it's the next coming step, and connect it to Bethesda. So we have that electronic hookup between the premier military hospital in the country, and there may be a couple others, but certainly our 5 polytrauma centers.
Thank you. Orlando, Florida Hospital status report.
Let me call on Dr. Petzel.
Excuse me, Congresswoman Brown, work is proceeding apace at Orlando. There are now over 900 people on the site working, and we are in discussions with Brassfield Gorey, the contractor, about completion dates and continue with the project. We are optimistic that this is going to get done, and as I said, it is proceeding apace.
Thank you very much. I was just there less than a month ago reviewing the project. You know, I wanted it completed yesterday, but thank you as we move forward together. And thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Dr. Benishek, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, Secretary Shinseki, for being here this morning along with your team. I guess my concern is, to tell you the truth, Mr. Secretary, is I know how difficult it must be managing a bureaucracy of the size of the Veterans Administration, and I guess my concern is about the management of these projects that are going on here. We're constantly being told that we're just not making it. You know, we didn't get the IT thing done. We didn't get this thing undone, but we're working on it. It's going to be better. I'm just wondering if
Is there any system in the management plan which rewards or disincentivizes people for not meeting these goals? I just get a little bit frustrated when I see that. Well, we had a goal for an integrated IT thing, and now it all broke down, and now we're kind of working on it again. It seems to me that, you know, if I've got somebody in charge of a project, and all of a sudden the project is a mess, and I have to explain it, like you have had to do, I would make sure that that person was no longer in charge of that project, or there's some incentive for somebody if they're going to say they're going to do a project, that they get it done like they say. And you end up being an apologist for what your staff and what the administration of the the whole project's under you, because you can't be doing it yourself. So I'm wondering what exactly is in place in your management team to incentivize or disincentivize those people that are in charge of all these little projects that we're talking about here? Because I see it as a difficulty in management. Could you kind of go through that with me a little bit?
Sure. Congressman, thanks for recognizing it's a large and complex operation, and if you want to do everything well, you've got to go at the whole organization and think about change. When I arrived, I took a good look at the level of training we provided our people. It wasn't what I thought it needed to be, and in the 4 years, that's been validated. So you will see in our effort tremendous expenditure of resources and commitment to get our people trained. It's difficult to hold someone accountable for a standard if you haven't trained them to it. All you do is you keep changing out the players. So for us as an organization, we're after building a competent organization, not just at the top, but all the way throughout the organization. And to do that, we must train people on the jobs we expect them to do, get them to that standard, and then we can hold them accountable by measuring performance against that standard. And usually in a training discussion, that gap between the standard and an individual's performance is what's called the training gap. That's what you have to train on. If we've trained them to the standard and they don't perform, then we have some actions.
But at what point, though, isn't there some point where training is over, you're on the job, but you haven't performed? I'm a surgeon. I'm sort of responsible for the stuff that I do.
Sure.
I had a training period, but after a while, your training is over, and you have to you get better as you go on. But to me, the answer of more training does not ring true.
Well, there's sufficient turnover in an organization that training is an ongoing process. The ones we have trained, definitely, we can hold them accountable, and then we provide them the tools to do their job. And earlier there was some discussion about VBMS having crashed this week. The term crash is not an appropriate description. When you field a large IT program, we started with VBMS 1.0. We're now up to 4.2. And in the 4.2 program, there was one of those patches that didn't take. And so as we fielded 4.2 2 weekends ago, we noticed that patch wasn't working, and we pulled the patch offline to work it. But the rest of 4.2 went in and continued to function. VBMS was available. We have now fixed that patch, which is usually what happens, and we've put it in place, and VBMS is functioning. It is a powerful tool in the hands of trained people.
I guess I'm just not. I know the person on the ground dealing with a program or something. That's an employee, but I'm talking about the management, and the management of this. Of these individual sectors. It just seems to me that if you keep missing your goals, does anybody change? Does management change? Are you changing somebody out? Are the people held responsible for not meeting their goals? Or the answer is that, well, we just couldn't meet the goals, and that was an unrealistic goal, and we have to reassess it. But that's the answer we get all the time. Is there never a situation that arrives where somebody's incompetent?
I'd just say in 2009, this department rated executives above 53%. All of them were rated outstanding. Today, those ratings are around 25%.
that's, I think there needs to be some sort of a incentive program for producing a goal that you get, or a disincentive program that if you don't make it, you understand what I'm saying? Because to me, it doesn't seem as if there's any consequences for not getting these things done.
Yeah.
So I think my
fair enough. I'm happy
up.
to have a discussion with you, Congressman, on that. Open to suggestions. We have to train our leaders as well as our workforce, and that's been an ongoing process as well.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. O'Rourke, you recognize 5 minutes.
Mr. Secretary, I'd also like to thank you for your service and what you described as a very ambitious set of goals and agenda that is matched with the muscle necessary to implement it. And I know that part of what we're considering today is the addition to the muscle of resources that you can allocate towards achieving these goals. And I also want to thank you personally and your undersecretaries for their responsiveness on issues that we've brought to their attention. And case in point for us is the 19.5 full-time mental health positions that have gone unfilled for far too long in El Paso. Since bringing that to your attention, we're down to 11, which is progress, and we'd like to see it get down to 0, of course, and would appreciate your help with that. Another issue that we brought to your attention is the poor performance of the regional office in Waco, serving benefit claims throughout Texas, and including the 80,000 veterans who live in El Paso. And as you know, I think the average wait time is 439 days. 80% of those claims are over 125 days. So from the new resources being requested in the President's budget, how will you use those in regional offices like Waco to improve performance?
I'm going to call on Secretary Hickey here to talk about Waco. I would just say, Congressman, if you recall, back in 2010, we made a decision to provide Agent Orange service connection for Vietnam veterans 40 years ago who were experiencing 3 new diseases. That increased our workload. Waco was one of those sites where a large number of those claims were brokered. And as a result, they had an increased workload, unlike others. And so it took them 2 years to work through that, and it slows the other claims processing. Unfortunate, no veteran should wait. But again, the decision made in 2010 was also the right decision to take care of Vietnam veterans. That's sort of the background on Waco. Let me ask Secretary Hickey to address your details about how it looks going forward.
Congressman, Waco is actually in the process of going through several of the transformation initiatives. To start with, we are running all of the individuals who are new to their positions through the new challenge training, which allows people to be new employees coming into the system with that new challenge training to do 150% more claims at a 30% increase in quality than their predecessors could, effectively making them a much more helpful rater or claims evidence gatherer earlier in their career. Second thing I will tell you is we have put quality review teams inside of Waco, as we have done in every one of our other regional offices, reducing the amount of cycle time we have for errors that we catch downstream. I can tell you nationally we've reduced the number of errors we've found on our exams by 12%, and I can tell you nationally we've reduced the number of errors we found on our letters by 23%. Those are both things that take time and create some of those long wait periods for our veterans that we want to get rid of, so we do it right the first time by them. The other thing I will tell you is we have put Waco into our new organizational model, as we have done for now all of our regional offices 9 months ahead of schedule. They now have that express lane, that core lane, that special operations lane. They had a number of claims that could have been done in that express lane. Once we sort of broke them into the lanes, we could see that, lift that work that is faster and easier to do because it has just 1 or 2 medical issues. They are pushing right now on that express lane really hard, and they've staffed that lane to make sure it happens. The last thing I'll say is my appreciation to the state of Texas, the Texas Veterans Commission, for the partnership that they are providing us in bringing us in more fully developed claims. That's where they help us go find all that evidence we need to make that decision. They've been particularly helpful in finding private medical records, and my appreciation to the state for what they are contributing and helping us.
Thank you for your answer and your attention to this. And as I've said before in previous hearings, we look forward to working with you collaboratively to make sure that we can do a better job out of Waco. And I know I have very limited time, Mr. Secretary, but I am interested in hearing your response to how we can protect low and moderate income veterans from the negative consequences of chain CPI, and how we make sure that we still take care of them and don't introduce an undue hardship to them and their families.
Congressman, I would just say, and here again, it's consistent with what the President has done elsewhere, and that's the desire to protect the vulnerable populations. The proposal excludes beam-tested veterans' pensions, which are provided to low-income wartime veterans who are age 65 or older, or who are under age 65 but remain totally and permanently disabled as a result of conditions unrelated to their military service. The budget proposal also excludes certain veterans' education benefit programs, for example, post-9/11 GI Bill, Montgomery GI Bill active duty, because inflationary adjustments for these programs are decided by the National Center for Educational Statistics. Okay.
Dr. Rowe.
Thank the Chairman, and thank you all, General Shinseki, for being here, and all the veterans that are here today. And again, to echo, thank you all for your service all the way in the room. You mentioned, and as I read your testimony last night, that you wanted to increase access to veterans' benefits and services, and of course eliminate the claims backlog and homelessness. I would add another, and that is to reduce the alarming rate of suicide among our active duty veterans and active duty military and veterans. You and I, when we spoke, I guess 6 weeks or so ago, looked at the budget, the VA budget, and just from a 40-year look, as I've had since I was in the military, and looking at the last 10 years, we've gone from $100 billion now to this budget request $152 billion. So, and you told me you thought you had the resources to do what you needed to do. And I believe I have never seen the VA provide more services than it has right now at this point in time. It never has. So I think that's a good thing, and certainly this committee, I think, will continue to do that. There are lots of problems in a bureaucracy this big, and as I've listened, one of the things that Dr. Benishek brought up and was brought up is that if you hear Mr. Bilirakis had an issue, Ms. Brown had an issue, it seems like it's a squeaky wheel that gets some noise. If we bring it to you, it gets looked at. But I think that Dr. Benishek made a great point, is that if there are 19 places unfilled, why in the world did that happen? An issue I brought to you was 6 weeks ago was when a veteran dies, and there's no discussion about that. You have a death certificate. This veteran dies. Their spouse sometimes takes months or year, maybe as much as a year, to get their benefit. That is absolutely unacceptable. When you've got a veteran out there, a spouse, man or woman, and they're especially the older veterans that are out there that are living on a very meager income, and then to have them wait. I mean, they have a house, as we talked about, they have a house payment, they have food to buy. They shouldn't miss a check. I mean, that should not even be questioned. And why we can't do that, I had veterans benefit people come in and talk to me about this, and they had one that was a year long, and this person is in was in dire straits. So anyway, I'll listen for that. I guess another thing, a question I have was brought up is that you mentioned the significant percentage of OIF, OEF members who are using veteran services, but that's only about 10% of all veterans patients. And as you all look forward, do you have the resources going forward to take care of those veterans that you expect to come in? I mean, I know you know are the resources there?
Congressman, just let me touch on the spouse issue you mentioned and go forward. I do have it from you, and we are working on it. I'm equally, concerned and frustrated as you are by having to do this. I think we're required to do this. We're looking for a way not to have to revalidate the spouse on the, the death of a veteran. But we'll work with you on that.
Thank you.
Regarding our resourcing for Iraq and Afghanistan veterans as they return, what we have is the understanding that over the next 5 years, up to 1 million veterans will be leaving the military and becoming veterans. And based on that, we have at least described what we think that flow rate will be as best we understand it, and then provided a resource request for the 14-15 piece of that. We are in the process of developing a 5-year look at our budgeting process. This is VA internally, so that we look at a planning phase out there that's beyond the 2-year budgets we are fortunate to have because of the Congress, but then a programming and then a budgeting execution phase. So that gives us a way of describing what our requirements are going to be when we come to budget. Based on what we know today, the 2-year look we're providing here accommodates what we expect will be the flow.
Okay, another question I have is the integration between DOD and VA on the electronic health records and the benefits. Should we have a joint meeting between DOD, and I realize that Defense Secretary Hagel has a lot on his plate with North Korea and in the Middle East right now. Yep. But this is one of my concerns when we changed was the fact that this will get a back burner again. And are we going to be sitting here, and you and I have spoken about this, and that was a private conversation, it'll remain that way, but are we going to be sitting here a year from now or 2 years or 3 years, because it's not a resource, there's plenty of money, to be able to integrate these systems. I mean, it's really become very frustrating to me to sit here year after year now, and unless the voters have a different idea, I plan to be here in 2015 and to see if we complete these things that we're saying we're going to do. Is it there?
Yeah. I would say, again, Congressman, Secretary Hagel and I have discussed this on at least 2 and maybe 3 occasions. He is, again, putting in place his system to assure the way ahead for him to make this decision and be the partner that we need here. He is committed to integrated electronic health record between the 2 departments. VA has made its decision on the core, and we're prepared to move forward.
Somebody has to blink. It's going to have to be one of you. I mean, obviously we can't integrate them, so it's going to have to be one system or the other. And I think what I heard you say was you've decided the VA is going to stay with what it has. That means that he's going to have to blink.
I would say the VA system is government-owned, government-operated. We have put VISTA into the open architecture trade space, so anyone who wants to use it can use it. It's used in other countries. I believe it is a powerful system, and I'm just awaiting a discussion with Secretary Hagel.
Thank you, Chairman. I yield it.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for your words on VISTA. I think the committee's in full agreement. I would remind, he probably doesn't know, my colleague, yet, that we are working on another joint meeting with both secretaries specifically on this issue. Because I am encouraged by some of the words that I have received regarding Secretary Hagel and his willingness to move forward. He has been involved in it for a long time, yep. And I think it may move in the right direction finally. Mr. Waltz, you are recognized. 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Mr. Secretary and your team, thank you for being here. I'm grateful for that. Always grateful for the work we're doing, but as we all know, it's until every veteran is served at the highest level we have work to do, and I know this team understands that clearly. I'm hopeful now that the public understands the need to care for our veterans. I think the silver lining in the backlog is it's brought about to the attention of the American public, and then that's a good thing. Even some of our colleagues now, I've noticed, have been, outside of this committee, have been using terms like seamless transition. That's good. I think it's important for this committee, though, to maybe gently remind them they're not the first people to think of it. There's complexities to this that have been thought about, and the committee process works in at least in this place, where members are trying to find it and looking through this. So I'm grateful for that, but I also know, General, you sense the frustration that grows. You have it yourself, and I've seen you express that, and I have said it. I am convinced we've got the right people there, but we've got to bust this thing. So it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to talk to the American public. It's an opportunity for us to talk about what we do right, but it's an opportunity for us to work on getting things better. And not to miss the opportunity for my wheel to squeak, Dr. Rowe. Since we were here, I did have this, maybe parochial, but I think it's bigger than that, General. I just have a question. Looking at the budget, there's no mention in here, and Dr. Petzl, this may be for you. I see no mention of long-term TBI rehab provisions that came out of the Lejeune Act. You know, when Congressman Bozeman was over here, and now Senator Bozeman, we worked on this. It was the ambiguities in the law on TBI treatment to move beyond the holistic approach, to move beyond physical, move to get these folks back mental needs as well as quality of life, long-term recovery and process. I see no hint that this provision is being implemented in the budget proposal. Indeed, the Selected Medical Program projects a reduction in TBI care for OEF and OIF veterans for 2014 and 2015. Other than the non-reoccurring maintenance the chairman spoke about, no other program is going to see a reduction. So we passed this bill, passed the House, passed the Senate. President signed it in there. It was crafted with the VSOs. It was crafted with the caregivers. It was to make sure that our warriors are brought back to the highest level possible as the research catches up and takes them forward. And looking at the budget, it's hard for me to see how we're going to implement that. So, yes, parochial, but I think an issue we all in this room deeply care about is returning care of those warriors, especially TBI.
Let me call on Dr. Petzl, and then I'll add something to close out.
Congressman Walz, thank you very much. It's an acute observation about the TBI budget. We're anticipating that the acute TBI cases that we've seen as a result of war are going to be decreasing, that we will not see as many people coming for the acute care. But we do have, in the process of being developed, a plan for the holistic long-term care that you described before. And there will be, as a result of the fewer acute patients we're caring for, there will be money available to develop that program.
Dr. Petzl, how did, and I know this was what we were asking for was, as the VA often does, is almost unprecedented. We weren't seeing it in the civilian sector. We were asking for an approach to care that was at that cutting edge as it was going. How are you seeing that implemented? What are some of the things that we do on that care to move them beyond just getting them back to a physical baseline? How are we not just maintaining that? How are we moving further on all those aspects of their life?
Well, first of all, it starts at the acute rehabilitation phase, Congressman, where you don't just have physical therapists doing physical therapy. You have behavioral scientists, you have recreational therapists, you have people who are, even at that point in time, working to reintegrate these people into their community and working with their families to do that. Then each one of our polytrauma centers now has a transition unit, if you will, an apartment that is suited to teach people how to survive and live by themselves or with minimal help. And as that's being done, all these other more holistic things in a person's life are being integrated into what that individual does. And then, as I mentioned earlier when we were talking about polytrauma, we progressively are moving people towards their community and towards their home. I'm very pleased that the huge majority of the people that we see in polytrauma are now back in their homes, being cared for by home-based primary care, home-based care, et cetera.
Dr. Petzl, do you feel like what this act did has been incorporated into the cultural treatment of how we see now what our responsibility is at VA?
Yes, I believe it is being incorporated, absolutely.
Very good. I appreciate that.
I would just add just one small point here. Congressman, I think you're aware of this. At our polytrauma centers, we have an awakening awareness program. And here is where our most severely injured, brain-injured veterans go. And most of them are deeply comatose when they arrive there. Through great work, cutting-edge work at these polytrauma centers, I believe we're about 69% of those deeply comatose, and in some cases declared vegetative patients are being brought back to consciousness and then worked back into the capability to communicate and go on living, a life that has more independence with it.
I'm appreciative of that. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Mr. Runyon?
I have nothing right now, Chairman. Yield back.
Let's see. Custer. Hi, how are you?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Ranking Member Michaud, for holding this hearing. General Shinseki, great to see you again, and thank you. I want to cover two topics, and I know our time is short. The first is a cultural shift similar to one we were just discussing. I'm a new member of Congress, and I'm extremely concerned about the treatment of women in the military when we have 1 out of every 3 women and a fair number of men experiencing sexual assault and the trauma that comes with that. And so I'd like to hear from you about your mental health treatment and how you intend to incorporate the very sensitive and cutting-edge treatment models for victims of sexual assault, particularly in the circumstance where they may or may not have had the opportunity to properly adjudicate those claims, and they may have been re-victimized in the process, separated from service, separated from their unit. So I'd like to hear from you, and particularly whether those services are available throughout the veteran system.
Congresswoman, I'm going to call on Secretary Hickey to talk a little bit about the claims that go along with this, because I think her insights will be helpful. I would just say I think the use of the term, as you did, sexual assault, is an appropriate description of what we're dealing with. Somehow other terms make it sound like it's a condition. This is a crime, and we ought to look at it that way. And then, leaders ought to take charge here. I would just point out that in this year's budget, if we were to look back to 2009 and come forward through our budgets, women's veterans programs have been increased by 134%. And so much of your concern about are we paying attention here and doing the right things, I think we are. It's reflected in the budget. But we're always open to insights on what we should be doing better. With regard to disability claims, we are going back to take a look at decisions that may have been rendered earlier and just checking ourselves out. Let me ask Secretary Hickey to take that one on.
Thank you.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Let me tell you, when I arrived here in June of 11, one of the first things I did within the first 2 weeks was to ask to have a comparison of our grant denial rates between PTSD associated with sexual assault and PTSD associated with all the other 3 major conditions: combat, fear, terrorism. And I did note in June 2011, this was an action I took of my own accord, that we had a disparity between the ways in which we granted and denied those. We put in some very fast action. It was together both a VHA and a VBA action. We identified very specific people to deal with this situation from the VBA perspective. We heard from our veterans who are dealing with this issue. They wanted to talk to women, so there is now a dedicated person in every regional office who handles these claims. We have trained together both those on the health side who are working with our victims here, and put into place some new processes. I can tell you, every quarter I ask for an update. By June the next year, we were clearly at par with the way we grant and deny other PTSD environments. We have remained that way. I continue to pull them just to assess it and make sure that it happens. And Dr. Petzel also in VHA provides the health care, the ongoing health care for these victims to ensure that they are cared for in that perspective as well.
So thank you very much. I'm going to go on to my next question. My time is very short, but I would love to work with you, and I know there are others on this committee and throughout the Congress that would like to work with you on that subject. This is a much more parochial subject, but I think it probably impacts other areas. I have a very rural part in the North Country of New Hampshire. We've recently, with the New Hampshire delegation, sent a letter to you about both a telehealth and a clinic in Colebrook, New Hampshire. But more broadly, I'd be interested in a conversation about expanding telehealth facilities, one-day-a-week facilities, and any information you might have to share with us about the new patient-centered community care program in New Hampshire. And I'd love to work with you and your team going forward to increase access to service for veterans living in a rural community. Thank you.
I would just say, let me call on Dr. Petzel to try to provide as much detail. I think the letter is recent enough. I don't have a comprehensive plan to come back with, but let me see what Dr. Petzel can provide.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Congressman Custer, we are very empathetic with the ruralness of northern New Hampshire. Telemedicine is a burgeoning part of the way we deliver care, and we would very much like to sit down with you and talk about how we can increase availability of those kinds of services. We have places where we do this in a veteran service club, where the telemedicine is there and it's connected to either a hospital or a large-scale clinic. There are many, many ways that we can provide this service in rural areas, and we'd like to talk to you.
I would just add, this budget has $460 million in it for telehealth to address the kinds of things you're talking about. In addition, in those areas where we don't link well or we don't have a presence, we do have non-VA fee care as an available option, so we can go on the local economy and veterans can be served. We have over $5 billion into paying fee care costs.
Thank you very much, and thank you.
Thank you, Levy. Yielding, Mr. Hillscamp is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity. I apologize for slipping in here. And I want to follow up on the last comment about the issue about non-VA fee basis care. Can you describe, you gave us the numbers, Mr. Secretary, nationwide. Can you describe the response, how often is it used, and what services in general it can be used for? And then I'd like to follow up on your response.
I just gave you the rough numbers nationwide. It's about $5.9 billion. Decisions on the use of fee care is done locally by, the attending physician to decide whether to and how much. Let me call on Dr. Petzel to provide more detail.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Congressman Hillscamp, it is a widely used program. It is used particularly in rural areas, but not exclusively. And as the Secretary said, the decision is made on the part of the physician. They're prescribing or asking for some care that's not available in the community-based outpatient clinic or in the medical center, or may not be conveniently located to the individual's home, and that's when the fee care authorization is asked for. In Kansas, specifically, the Wichita VA Medical Center spends about $15 million a year on fee care program, and as you know, we have in Kansas Project Arch, which is a pilot project using fee care more extensively in a community to bring care into rural communities. We think it's a very important tool, if you will, to provide better access along with telemedicine, community-based outpatient clinics, and those other things we have.
And Doctor, follow up on the Project Arch. I presume that was in reference to the pilot project in Pratt, Kansas?
That's correct.
What's the local response to that? A few months ago, it didn't seem very positive. That it wasn't working very well was what I was hearing from that community. It's since been redistricted out of my congressional district. Don't have as much contact. Do you have more information on that?
The information I have, there are 223, as of January, 23 patients that were using Project Arch, and the feedback that I've gotten was that they were satisfied. There may be people who are not involved in the project that want to get involved, and I'll find out about that.
Mm-hmm. You said how many patients?
223.
Okay, well, that's changed considerably from the last information that I had. But back on the issue, the non-VA fee basis, I was at a hospital in Lardard, Kansas. By the way, my congressional district is so big that 2 days ago the difference in temperature across the district was 75 degrees from end to end. It was negative 2 degrees on the western edge and 73 on the other end. But so it's a big area, and I'll note Pratt being fairly close to Wichita is not what we consider rural in terms of access. It's the 200 or 300 mile. But I was at Larned, Kansas, and they said for every hour of patient care, they were spending 30 minutes filling out paperwork for every patient. And the response was, we can't do that. We just can't do that. And so I'd like some more information on that. Is that what we're hearing as well? So, I mean, I know you're talking about the dollars we spend, but there's incredible potential and need out there, and not just for the veterans themselves. It's for the spouses that get a drive and drive and drive, and the volunteers that drive from. By the way, thanks for finding a physician in Liberal, Kansas, and filling that this summer. Really appreciate that. As you know, we're talking 250-mile drives for volunteers and patients and spouses. So I'd like to follow up a little more information about the success of this, non-VA fee basis, because it seems like it's underutilized, particularly because of the heavy paperwork requirements.
We will particularly, Congressman, follow up with you about the paperwork requirements that you were talking about before. I want to just add that in addition to fee basis, telehealth in Kansas as well as other parts of the country is really a very popular and rapidly growing way of delivering specialty care particularly.
Okay, all right. Thank you. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, gentleman, for yielding. Congresswoman Negarate McLeod.
Thank you. Mr. Secretary, thank you for being here. The homelessness among veterans is a serious problem in my districts, and I'm sure it's in other districts. How many housing vouchers through the HUD VASH program do you anticipate will be funded by your request amount of the $278 million?
Dr. Hudson. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Congresswoman McLeod, we're expecting in the 14 budget another 10,000 additional HUD-VASH vouchers, and that will bring, I believe, the number of vouchers we have to over 46,000.
Okay, my second question, thank you. As you mentioned in your testimony, the number of women veterans enrolled in the VA health care has increased 22% since 2009. What is the VA's timeline for increasing the number of facilities that have comprehensive women clinics beyond the current 50%?
Another good question, Congresswoman McLeod. The VA has three ways that we try to meet the special needs of women veterans. The first is, as you mentioned, a comprehensive women's clinic that we find in places that have over 1,000 women patients. And that's bringing together all the services that might be needed into one clinical setting. So mental health, OBGYN, primary care, whatever might be needed is fixed in that area. And we have about 86 of those clinics, if I remember correctly, around the country. The next level is having a primary care clinic that is designated specifically for women and in which the primary care providers are specially trained to be able to recognize and manage issues that might be specific to women veterans. And in virtually all of our medical centers and most of our large outpatient clinics, we have that circumstance. And then the last area, in very small places where we have one or two providers, we have trained about 2,500 physicians and nurse practitioners in the special needs that women may have, and that's the way we manage this. So we have the three levels, and we will, whenever we can see a large enough number of women that need it, we will set up and do set up a comprehensive women's clinic. I want to point out that the budget devoted specifically to women's needs has grown since 2009 by 134%.
Because the number of women that are joining the forces and are coming home.
That's correct. We have well over 300,000 women now enrolled in veterans health care.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Winstrup.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Shinseki, we met a while ago, maybe 3-4 weeks ago, and I was wondering if you could update us. We talked about putting in place ways to increase the efficiency of the clinics and the ORs in our VA hospitals. From the standpoint especially of physicians having too much administrative duties that virtually anyone could do, and it takes them away from patient care. And if we could do that, we can allow healthcare providers to see more patients in a day, do more surgeries in a day, things like that. I was just wondering if you could give me an update on that.
I'm going to call on Dr. Petzel to provide some detail here, but this leads to our discussion of the patient-aligned care team, where a physician is sort of the focal point, but surrounded by other members of the care team that allow the physician to concentrate on what he or she does best, and that is see patients, take care of their needs. And then the administration, the tracking of pharmacy requirements is done by others, all part of that team. It's called PACT, Patient Aligned Care Team. That's our initiative, and we are implementing that across VA as we resource it. Dr. Petzel.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Congressman, we absolutely agree with you that getting the most out of the people that we have and operating our crowded facilities sometimes, like operating rooms, et cetera, in the most efficient manner, I think is very, very important. And as the Secretary described, we're involved in trying to set up a circumstance where people, first of all, work in teams, and secondly, where each individual works at the top of their license, so that physicians are only doing those things that physicians have to do. Nurses are only doing those things that you have to have a nurse do, and that administrative personnel, pharmacists, whatever, are doing only the things that they have to do. The place where we've begun doing this first is in our primary care clinics, and as the Secretary mentioned, they're called patient-aligned care teams. We have moved this now into specialty areas so that we're doing this in some orthopedic, ophthalmology, and other subspecialty clinics and cardiology. It's the way that we have to operate, and it's the way that things need to be done in the operating room, as well as any of the other procedure rooms. So we absolutely agree with you, and we are embarked on trying to do that.
Thank you. And as I did that day, I again offer you my time to participate in that process as a physician and surgeon who has had private practice as well as serving with DOD. And it might help to build a bridge between us and you.
That'd be great.
So I'd be glad to
welcome
help
that.
there.
We would.
Congressman, I would just add, so the value of the physician's time in terms of being able to see patients, if you think about the network of healthcare we provide in very rural areas, the last thing we need to do is put that physician on a road trying to get someplace to see a patient. And that's why our investments in telehealth and telemedicine, about $460 million in this budget, is intended to allow patients to come to the nearest VA facility. If the specialist isn't there, then this system hooks them up to the specialist they need to see, at least get that initial consult going, and then we can decide from there what needs to happen next.
Thank you. I yield back my time.
Ms. Kirkpatrick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Secretary Shinseki, for your appearance today before the committee and for your transformational vision for the VA. My question is, does this 2014 budget reflect all of the resources you need to continue and achieve that transformation within the VA?
Well, Congresswoman, thanks for that question. We've described, as I said earlier, a very bold and ambitious plan. It's a plan that's been resourced, and it's one that will give us the 2014 objectives we need to deliver on, leading to 2015 and on out. But it does give us the resources we need.
Do you have any concerns or expectations that you're going to need additional funding to meet those goals, especially your goal to reduce the backlog by 2015?
Yeah. I will say, as I said earlier, the plan we laid out is an assumption-based plan that we know the variables out there. If there's a change, a sudden surge in the arrival of patients, we'll have to adjust. What we do know from the Department of Defense is over the next 5 years, up to 1 million service members will be leaving the military. And so we have been given an understanding that there will be a flow here as opposed to a spike on day one or a spike on day last. And so we've accommodated that flow. If that changes, then we will have to readjust the plan, and if needed, we'll come back.
That's my concern. That's a lot of veterans to process in a system that already has backlogs. And so I really have a concern about that, but we'll be watching that process. But obviously, you've factored that into your budget, and you're making those planning changes.
And all the more reason that we have to automate now. We're in paper. We've been in paper too long. We still receive paper. And all of this effort is not just to automate our systems, but to get others to provide us digits so that we have a seamless handoff of our veterans.
Thank you. Thank you, Secretary. I yield back.
Thank you very much, Ms. Wolarski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, good to see you again. And I understand your testimony. You had spoken about since 2009, the VA has opened an additional 57 community-based outpatient clinics, CBOCs. And as you're aware, a new CBOC is planned to open in my district in 2015. Since I saw you last, my understanding is that that project is behind. Is there any kind of a status report that you guys could provide to the veterans in my district as to what the status is of that CBOC?
I'd like to give you the best answer I can. I'm going to call on Dr. Petzel here.
Okay.
Exactly the status
Thank
of
you.
that CBOC.
I have information about the South Bend CBOC.
Correct.
And that is, as I understand it, thank you for a minute. That, as I understand it, did have a delay, but as I am told, it is back on pace. I can't give you a date when it's open, but we will get back to you and see if we can do that.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. And in that getting back to us, is there some kind of a timeline where we can expect a status report?
Immediately. I mean, I will have someone get back to you within the next week at the latest.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back my time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ruiz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Secretary Shinseki, for all the work that you're doing. It's great to see you again. I just want to initially, before I ask my question, follow up with Dr. Wenstrup's comment and to ensure that the paperwork that physicians have to do in general is not only a problem in the VA but in the private sector. And I think that looking at the private sector would be a good way of looking at how we can cut down on the amount of physician spends on the paperwork. One of the things that we have done in the emergency departments, for example, as you know, I'm an emergency medicine physician, is to use scribes. And we utilize oftentimes pre-med students in the VA system. It could be medics who can deal with the paperwork, the forms that have been trained. That will allow physicians more time to spend with the patients as the goal would be. Now, and so I'm hoping that the scribe model would possibly be under the PACT team that will specifically address the paperwork and the forms that the physicians have to fill. In terms of my question, I want to talk about the claims backlog, and I know that this is a very complicated system, and I know that in order to address this and address the efficiency, we break it down into different parts of what a veteran has to go through from initially understanding what their benefits are, what they want to claim, and then to the end results. In that systemic process, what, in your opinion, is the top is one or two bottlenecks in the system that takes a long time?
Thank you, Congressman Ruiz. The biggest bottleneck is collecting the evidence, finding the evidence, whether that is basically three big pieces we need. We need the DOD medical records while they were in service. We need the DoD personnel records for the character of their service, awards, decorations, a form, DD-214, kinds of forms that let us know dates and times and how they served and whether that qualifies. And we need private medical records. We also need VHA medical records, but that's the easiest thing for us to do. We literally have access directly in VBA right into the medical record. We can look at it, bring that data forward, use that instantaneously. It's those other three parts are the parts that make it very difficult to do.
Thank you. And
I would just add, and that's why this very significant effort to digitally connect VA to DoD for personnel records, for medical health records. Right now, we rely on veterans to provide so much of this information, and they shouldn't have to carry that burden. We ought to be able to do this as a department, and that's what we're working on.
That's a very good point. I've spoken to some veterans in the district that I'm from, the 36 in California by Palm Springs, Coachella Valley, and most of them are seniors, and they have very difficult time getting to their hearings for their claims in front of the VA board due to many reasons, financial, transportation, etc. Let me ask you, is video conferencing a efficient way of decreasing that burden on our seniors?
I'm going to ask Secretary Hickey to add some detail here, but the virtual hearings are a way we are able to cut down on travel and also increase efficiency and decision making. And when we review the face-to-face hearings and what happens on the virtual hearings, the results are comparable. There's no disadvantage. And so this would be our preference to resolve the issue you described, but veterans have a choice. And I know some would prefer to be face-to-face, and we accommodate when that request is made.
Congressman, the only thing I will add is that our partners, as in the entire claims process, are critical to our ability to assist, especially our elderly patients, and our elderly veterans and their survivors and family members. So we do work very closely with our VSOs and our state county service officers to facilitate those VTC exams, and we are seeing a very large increase in willingness to take that process, and so we're seeing that as a good thing. The other thing I would just share with you, about 40% right now of our board's efforts to do the teleconferencing are done via, to do the face-to-face with the appeals process are done via the tele-VTC environment.
Thank you very much. I appreciate all the work that you do, and I yield back my time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. I know I promised we'd have a second round of questions, but we're running out of time, and I know you've been here for an hour and a half, and when I say running out of time, I mean legislative time. We have all the time in the world to help you in solving the problems that exist out there today, but a lot of the members have expressed a desire to send additional questions. We'll try and bring them all together into one document if we can to make it a little bit easier for you and your staff to be able to respond. We appreciate you being here this morning.
We will do that. Thanks again, Mr. Chairman, for this opportunity to be here to present our budget. We appreciate the past support, and we look forward to your support on this one as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and you're now excused. And as the first panel is excused, I want to invite the second panel to start making their way forward, if you will, and we will wait for introductions until folks are seated at the table.
Yeah, I do.
Because he's well-liked, and he's looked at pretty naughty.
Yeah. Yeah, we're taking him completely seriously.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, we're taking it seriously.
Of course.
We raised $330 this past quarter.
Did you really?
Yeah,
wow.
$330,000.
How'd you do that?
On the phone, working, doing what I have to do. So we have to keep pushing it, Chris. See you later.
If I could ask the members to go ahead and take their seats, we'd like to continue. Thank you very much. We'll welcome the second panelist to the table with us this morning, Jeffrey Hall, Assistant National Legislative Director for the Disabled American Veterans, Carl Blake, National Legislative Director of the Paralyzed Veterans of America, Diane Zumato, National Legislative Director of AMVETS, Ray Kelly, Legislative Director for the Veterans of Foreign Wars of the United States, and Mr. Louis Celli, Legislative Director of the American Legion. Your complete written statements will be made a part of the hearing this morning. Mr. Celli, I would say we didn't receive the Legions until less than an hour before this hearing. That's never happened that I'm aware of, and so hopefully we won't have to. It's very difficult when we get the President's budget late, and then we get comments from organizations late. It makes it very difficult for members to be able to absorb the testimony that you're giving here today. So, again, your complete written statements will be made part of the hearing record. And Mr. Hall, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Miller, Ranking Member Michaud, and members of the committee, on behalf of DAV, I'm pleased to be here today to present recommendations of the independent budget for fiscal year 2014 related to Veterans Benefits and the Veterans Benefits Administration. This year's IB contains numerous recommendations to improve benefits programs and the claims processing system. However, I will be highlighting only a few of the more critical ones. Mr. Chairman, with VBA committed to processing all disability claims in less than 125 days with a 98% accuracy by 2015, they have their work cut out for them. VBA is currently rolling out new organizational models and practices and continuing to develop and deploy new technologies almost daily. In the midst of the massive transformation, it can be hard to get or keep the proper perspective to measure whether they will achieve their ambitious goals. So the question is, will transformation be completely successful? The simple answer is, we still think it's too early to tell. But we do believe that VBA is on the right path and has made sufficient progress to warrant continued support of the current transformation efforts. Mr. Chairman, now is not the time to stop or change direction, and Congress must continue to perform aggressive oversight, particularly of the new IT programs, but must also continue to provide sufficient funding to complete the transition away from paper. Additionally, in the middle of the comprehensive transformation, including the new IT system, which changes the roles and responsibilities of VBA's employees, it is difficult to determine whether or not staffing levels are or will be adequate to handle the workload once these changes are fully implemented. For that reason, the IB is not recommending a specific staffing increase for claims processing in fiscal year 2014. However, we are recommending modest staffing increases for the Board of Veterans' Appeals, as well as the Vocational Rehabilitation and Employment Service. Although the Board has been authorized to have up to 544 full-time employees in fiscal year 2011, its appropriated budget fell short and could only support 532 full-time employees that year. In fiscal year 2012, that number was further reduced to 510, and at present, the Board's fiscal year 2013 budget may be able to support as many as 518 full-time employees. However, based on an expected workload increase for fiscal year 2014 through conversations with the board, even while adjusting for the projected productivity gains, the independent budget VSOs recommend that the board be provided funding for at least 544 full-time employees for fiscal year 2014 in order to reduce its backlog and reduce the wait times. Also, in fiscal year 2012, VA's Vocational Rehabilitation and Employment Program, also known as Vet Success Program, had 121,000 participants, a 12.3% more than in fiscal year 2011, and VRE anticipates a 10% workload increase for both fiscal year 2013 and 2014. To meet this need, we are recommending that the VR&E be provided funding for approximately 230 additional counselors in fiscal year 2014 in order to meet the rising workload demand and reduce their counselor-to-client ratio down to their stated goal of one counselor for every 125 veterans. Mr. Chairman, in the past year, there has been much discussion about replacing the current CPI formula used for calculating the annual Social Security COLA with a new formula commonly called the chain CPI, in an attempt to lower the federal deficit by reducing the rates paid to Social Security recipients. Since the Social Security COLA is also applied annually to the rates of VA disability compensation and DIC, this would also mean a reduction in veterans' benefits. The IBVSOs urge Congress to reject any proposal to use the chain CPI or any other scheme that would attempt to reduce the federal deficit on the back of America's wounded heroes. And finally, Mr. Chairman, the IBVSOs call on Congress to correct some longstanding injustices in how certain disabled veterans and their surviving spouses are treated under current law. Congress must finally repeal the inequitable requirement that veterans' military longevity retired pay be offset by the amount equal to disability compensation awarded to disabled veterans rated less than 50%, the same as that exists for those rated 50% or greater. And finally, Congress must finally repeal the inequitable offset between DIC and SBP. There's no duplication between these two benefits. They're separate and distinct. And lastly, Congress should enact legislation to enable survivors to retain their DIC on remarriage at the age of 55 for all eligible surviving spouses. This concludes my statement. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hall. Mr. Blake.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On behalf of the co-authors of the independent budget, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to be here today to testify. I'll say up front that we certainly believe that the administration is committed to delivering timely, quality health care and benefits to veterans. That being said, an increase in funding does not automatically lead to the assumption that sufficient funding is being provided. I will note that the independent budget released our recommendations back in February, and for the first time we included advance appropriation recommendations for FY 2015 for health care. I'm going to limit my comments to the health care funding and particularly to the 2015 advance appropriations. Just based on a quick analysis of the administration's numbers released yesterday, you'll see that they provide for approximately $1.1 billion in total medical care dollars from what was just recently enacted for 2014 to 2015. Certainly that's not a small amount of money, but I would offer that we don't believe that $1.1 billion is sufficient to meet even current services increases. Medical care inflation in general trends about 3% right now. $1.1 billion is about 1.9%. So I would question whether the increase that they've projected would even meet current services. That's without even considering the fact that they once again reduce spending or plan to reduce spending in medical facilities, particularly at the expense of non-recurring maintenance. And I won't talk about construction issues. I know my colleague from the VFW will get into that. We reviewed their utilization, and I think there's some sound reasoning in all of the utilization. I would point to one concern that we have, and we've raised this concern in the past about OIF, OEF, and OND utilization. I would note that they project for 2014 and 2015 the same exact number for both years. My immediate concern would be we're all well aware of the status of the military funding, and as it's projected, a plan to not only start withdrawing from Afghanistan in 2014, but also to start to draw down the military, which is actually going on right now. And we believe certainly that will have some sort of an impact on utilization in the VA. A couple of particular concerns that we have, first with collections. We've voiced this concern many times in the past as well. Ultimately, the VA continues to overproject and underperform. I'll use fiscal year 2013 as an example. Last year, they projected $2.9 billion approximately in collections. You now see from their budget request released yesterday, they're projecting about $2.8 billion, about $125 million. I know that's small change in the context of a multi-billion-dollar budget, but our concern would be that what's going to fill the gap now left by that $125 million in collections that they don't achieve. Ultimately, that's dollars that need to be found somewhere, because that $2.9 billion was the basis for the assumption of providing care in the coming fiscal year. We would draw your attention to the fact that their projections for this year and next year are around $3.1, $3.2 billion. We'll be interested to see if they can come close to achieving those projections. I would suggest that their track record on collections would suggest that they cannot. Another concern that we've raised over and over again is with proposed savings and management improvements. In fact, it specifically says in the appendix for the VA budget this year that due to projected management improvements that they would achieve in 13, 14, and 15, that they will be able to reduce the need for appropriations in 2014 and 2015. It's not clear how much they have reduced their projection for needed appropriations. I will suggest that in their budget, they show $482 million in proposed savings for 2014 and 2015, and $1.3 billion in 2014 and 2015 for operational improvements. I don't know what portion of those $2 figures are factored into that reduction in appropriations, but those two together equal a large sum of money. I'll draw your attention also to some questions we have about the Affordable Care Act. The VA does mention that in 2014 they project a new cost associated with implementation of the ACA of about $85 million, which suggests that their assumptions are that between the number of veterans leaving the system and coming in is probably a net, not a large effect. Interestingly, though, for 2015, they project no new dollars needed for implementation of the ACA. I'd be curious to know what the basis for that is exactly. We have concerns about funding for research. For the fourth year in a row, research funding is essentially being kept flat. I know it's, I think, a $3 or $4 million increase over last year. That's not substantial. That's essentially flat. Lastly, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Michaud, we'd like to thank you for the introduction of H.R. 813. The four co-authors of the independent budget all support your legislation. We hope the committee will move that legislation pretty quickly. We also support the legislation introduced by Ms. Brownlee, H.R. 806, that would extend the GAO requirement for reporting on advanced appropriations. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to thank you, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Blake, also for your information. In 2 weeks, the full committee is going to have a hearing on the impact of the ACA on VA. So we welcome you to participate and be here to hear the testimony during that hearing. Ms. Amato, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today to share the recommendations from the independent budget for fiscal year 2014. In light of the ongoing fiscal challenges facing our nation and the growing demands for VA services, the IBVSOs call on Congress and the administration to make it their priority to ensure that the VA continually receives sufficient, timely, and predictable funding. It's unfortunate that the administration's funding recommendations for the VA in fiscal year 2014, as well as the advance appropriation recommendations for 2015, have been delayed by almost 2 months, and the IBVSOs are greatly concerned about how VA programs funding may be impacted going forward. Additionally, the ongoing breakdown in the appropriations process is a major concern to the IBVSOs and will most certainly have a negative effect on all VA operations. In fiscal year 2014, IB covers a myriad of veteran-related issues and makes numerous recommendations to improve veterans' benefit programs and the claims processing system. However, I'll focus my remarks today on employment. Some of the reasons for the persistently high unemployment rate among veterans can be found in a June 2012 study done by the Center for New American Security on employing America's veterans. And it examined the effect of military service on former service members as it relates to their employment opportunities. And while there were many positive reasons listed in the report for hiring veterans, it also noted that there were several challenges facing veterans when they are out seeking employment. And the focus of that was they have difficulty in skill translation, there's a problem of negative stereotype, there's skill mismatch, there's the fear of employers that if they hire National Guard or Reserve troops that they're going to be deployed. There's difficulty in acclimation, and many employers say that they just can't find veterans. In considering the many challenges that are facing the transitioning veterans, it appears that the toughest barrier for them right now is employment, and it seems abundantly clear that transitioning veterans seeking employment, especially those with health issues, face some unique obstacles, including the process of securing the licenses and credentials required by some professions. The issue of veteran licensing and credentialing continues to be of concern to those within the military and veterans communities and is made especially difficult for veterans due to its highly parochial nature, the complexities within the civilian credentialing system itself, the fact that each of the military services has its own unique training and credentialing programs, the need to overcome real or perceived gaps in military training, experience, and education, the ambiguity about which of the roughly 4,000 different credentials are most important to civilian employers, and perhaps most significantly, many military occupations, unlike their civilian equivalents, have no credentialing requirements. Military service and training are provided at both the state level for members of the National Guard or the federal level for active duty and reserve personnel. In light of this, a massive collaboration between DoD, VA, and DOL, as well as the Department of Education and the individual states, will be required. The IBVSOs applaud the fact that the administration has offered its support to ensure that service members leave the military career ready by proposing the following: increase veteran and service-disabled veteran tax credits, challenge to private sectors to commit to hiring or training veterans, and the career-ready military, which calls for DoD and VA to lead a joint task force with the White House economic and domestic policy teams and other agencies to develop proposals to maximize the career readiness of all service members, including a reverse boot camp and an initiative to deliver enhanced job search services to transitioning veterans through American Job Centers, including improved TAP workshops. That includes my testimony this morning, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Michaud, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity on behalf of the 2 million members of the Veterans of Foreign Wars and our auxiliary to be here today. As a partner of the independent budget, the VFW is in charge of the construction portion, so I'll limit my testimony to that. For the past few years, I've testified on how transparent the VA's Strategic Capital Investment Plan, or SCIP, has been in identifying gaps in safety, utilization, and access, and how this plan outlined to close those gaps within a decade. I still believe SCIP is an exceptional tool and is based on industry models and best practices. At the same time that we praise SCIP, the IB called for funding levels that would keep pace with VA's own model to close these existing gaps within 10 years. This model has not been met. In 3 years, the level of funding for major construction projects has fallen from $1.2 billion in FY 2010 to $532 million in FY 13. And now the administration is requesting only $342 million for FY 2014. The independent budget is requesting $1.1 billion to fund major construction projects in FY 2014. This is nowhere enough to put VA back on track to close all major construction gaps within 10 years, but it is an amount that can be responsibly invested within one fiscal year. This funding request does not fully address the IB's greatest infrastructure concern, which is safety, specifically seismic deficiencies. There are currently 6 projects on the VA's FY14 top 20 major medical facility projects list that are seismic safety projects. All of these projects have been initially funded, one as early as FY09, but none have been funded in this year's budget proposal. Only one project in the 2014 top 20 list is receiving any funding at all. And to VA's credit, this project will replace seismic deficient buildings with a new facility. More must be done. The President has requested in his larger budget proposal that $50 billion be spent on capital infrastructure. The IB suggests that a discussion take place to use some portion of this $50 billion to close the seismic safety gaps within VA. What is more important, repairing potholes and building bike paths or ensuring our veterans and VA staff are protected from the horrors that took place 42 years ago in Selmar, California, when a 6.6 magnitude earthquake collapsed a VA hospital, killing 49 and costing $2.8 billion in today's dollars to fix those damages. The IB is also concerned about the current state of capital leasing. Prior to 2012, the Congressional Budget Office treated major capital leasing as short-term leases or for already existing facilities or renewal of leases. In evaluating the cost of VA major construction authorization at the end of 2012, CBO changed their perception of these leases. Under the new rules, VA will have to fund all major lease projects like CBOX, treatment centers, and research facilities in the first year of that lease. Under current VA budgeting practices, this is impossible. The IB understands that this committee and VA are exploring every option to find a way for VA to continue the pre-12 leasing practice while staying within the current budget rules. However, if a solution cannot be found, the IB partners recommend that Congress should forego its own rules to ensure these leases can move forward and without further delay while a long-term solution is found. In closing, the IB would like to thank VA for requesting funding for activation costs associated with new medical facilities. This will take undue pressure off of VA to find the money necessary to make new facilities operational once they've been completed. Mr. Chairman, this concludes my remarks, and I look forward to any questions you or the committee may have.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Mr. Celli, you are now recognized for 5 minutes.
The American Legion has spent thousands of hours intimately working with the Department of Veteran Affairs. We appreciate their willingness to be transparent while reviewing their portion of the budget just last night. And we applaud the President's support and commitment to increasing VA funding in areas that will help eliminate the growing backlog as well as care for our wounded veterans. Chairman Miller, Ranking Member Michaud, members of this committee, on behalf of Commander Counts and the 2.5 million members of the American Legion, we welcome this opportunity to comment on the federal budget and specific funding programs of the Department of Veteran Affairs. In October of last year, National Commander Jimmy Counts provided the committee the American Legion's guidance for a robust Department of Veteran Affairs budget that adequately provides for the health care and benefits for veterans of all wars during this period of difficult financial times. As thousands of troops return from deployments from Afghanistan and elsewhere in the world, the United States shifts its policies in Iraq and Afghanistan, thus producing a new national security focus. The American Legion reminds the committee that the national security changes do not change the fact that the veterans of these wars, as well as prior conflicts, must be taken care in the aftermath of these wars, and this care will extend for these veterans and their caregivers for the next 60 years. While grateful for prior VA funding, the American Legion remains vigilant to ensure that VA is not going to be shortchanged of the funding that it truly needs. The lack of appropriate funding will endanger veterans' care and benefits. The American Legion has for years been testifying before the Congress of these United States, reminding them that the cost of war, especially prolonged war, is expensive and that the true costs are only realized decades after the war is over. Last month, the Harvard Kennedy School issued a report that projected the total cost of these current conflicts to cost between $4 and $6 trillion. The American Legion is encouraged with the proposed increases in the areas of claims processing, electronic records development, and medical care, and believe this is a step in the right direction. Lastly, as this committee just pointed out earlier and my colleagues have highlighted, VA received sufficient appropriations to continue to fund and operate leased facilities in 2012, but in 2013 the appropriations for these same facilities was eliminated due to a scoring change initiated by the Congressional Budget Office. As a result of the Congressional Budget Office's adjustment in scoring review, Congress refused to introduce in FY 2013 appropriations required to keep these community-based centers opened. As these leases now become due, there are 15 major medical facilities that will be forced to close unless Congress acts quickly to provide the appropriate funding to these centers. The American Legion urges Congress to fund these centers immediately and continue to prove the medical support to veterans in these remote areas. Based on the very short time that we've had to review this budget proposal, we prepared our preliminary review, which is reflected in our written testimony, and we look forward to answering any questions that the committee may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Celli. We'll now begin the first round of questions. I guess I'll start. Mr. Hall, on behalf of the independent budget co-authors, you testified that we believe there has been sufficient progress to merit continued support of the current transformation effort. Can you demonstrate some of these evidence of project progress? I mean, I'm frustrated. As you'd probably listen to my questions, you know, I've been a little frustrated by changing goals. And tell me what you've seen as a positive.
Well, there are several things. Thank you for the question. There are several things that I guess, but it's not certainly inclusive of others that I could mention, but simple things like the DBQ process, okay, which didn't exist, which is helpful to discovery of evidence in a claim. QRTs, the quality review teams, that's been a positive step in the right direction towards accuracy. The e-benefits, the stakeholder enterprise portal, these are all really good things that are going to matter to the system. All of them are in motion and still being worked out at the present time, so we certainly understand the frustration. But these are things what we feel are positives in the right direction, as well as the veterans claims intake processing, the VSIP for the scanning. Those are all things that, when I say sufficient, progress.
Well, thanks. I want to get a little input from you all about, you know, my question to Mr. Shinseki about, you know, what incentives are there for the administrators of the program to fulfill these goals? Do any of you have any input to how this could be better managed, that we don't have a moving goalpost all the time, so that, you know, the projects that the VA starts get finished on time, or that people are responsible for the failure of getting things done on time? Does any one of you have an idea as to how to better manage that? I mean, you've been involved in this probably longer than I have on an individual basis in dealing with that frustration. So just take a minute to see if you could each give me a little bit of a comment as to how I can, you know, change the way the VA works to try to make it better.
Well, I'll start and just simply say that, yes, VSOs enjoy an open collaborative effort with VA at different levels. Given the different types of programs that I highlighted in my previous comment, service organizations or stakeholders were able to provide that input, number one. So do they listen to it? Well, they certainly listen to a lot of the recommendation. More so, it seems to me, after 20 years of working in this business, that this administration is more open towards receiving our recommendations and not only receiving them, but actually implementing them. Now, when it comes to, I guess, your question of accountability, if there's a problem, they don't normally ask us
I know they're not going to ask you, but I'm asking you.
Well, if we provide them feedback and say, you got to hold these folks accountable, that's something that's a little bit elusive at this particular time still.
Yeah, I know that. Mr. Blake, you have any comment?
Mr. Banashek, first what I would say is sort of echo the comments of Mr. Hall. We were fortunate to have the opportunity to participate in VBMS as they're working out the bugs in that too. And I think having met with our head of our benefits department on a number of occasions, I think he feels comfortable that they're really heading in the right direction with VBMS in particular. To your actual question, when you asked the question earlier, I leaned in and I told my colleague, I said, it sounds like the question ought to be, can you fire a federal employee? And I'm not sure that that's, as hard as it is to hire federal employees, it's probably equally as hard to fire a federal employee. And I'm not suggesting that that's what needs to happen. But it certainly points to the difficulty of accountability through sort of a hard knocks approach. I'm not suggesting that, I don't envy any of the senior leadership of VA because I think I can't imagine the tasks that they are responsible for, and particularly for General Hickey. I mean, that might be the toughest job in Washington, from my opinion, given the responsibilities placed on her and what the expectation and outcome is supposed to be. It's certainly not an easy answer. I mean, I'm not suggesting anybody should be punished in a particular way. There certainly should be incentives and disincentives in some fashion.
Well, that's what I'm thinking. It just seems to me that there should be better accountability and better reward or carrot and stick for the managers. I'm not talking about the employee, delivering the service, but the managers, the way the system is run, should be more, accountable. Because I see Mr. Shinseki's job as very tough. Does anyone else have a comment while we still have a minute?
I'll echo what they said as well. The VFW would be very open to further discussion of how to do that accountability. We think it is very important to have leaders held accountable to
maybe I look forward to some conversations in the office. Thank you.
I just wanted to say that with the multitude of programs that the Department of Veterans Affairs has, there's a lot of work to be done. The fully developed claims project that the American Legion is involved with the Department of Veteran Affairs is a result of the collaboration that the VA has had with the VSOs. We think that transparency needs to continue. We feel comfortable that at this time the Department of Veterans Affairs has opened and welcomed us in to try to work with us on some of their problems. With regard to oversight, that's clearly your area.
Thank you. My time is up, Mr. Michaud.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And once again, I would like to thank the panel. When you look at accountability, and part of that is to make sure that I believe that the employees know what the clear standards are and the metrics that they're going to be held accountable to and for. And I guess my question, I want to follow up on what Dr. Rowe had mentioned during the first panel when he looks at the survivors' benefits in the widow's claim, and he's absolutely right. The backlog has increased tremendously, which you wouldn't think it would, particularly with those particular types of claims. And my big concern is actually, as you know, TOGUS is a high-performing RO. We used to do the pension claims at TOGUS. However, VA decided to centralize that in Pennsylvania. And unfortunately, since it went to Pennsylvania, all we're getting is complaints now from our veterans in Maine. And that is concerning. And I think it gets back to training, make sure employees are trained properly. It gets back to turnover rates, whether or not you have an RO that's really have a high turnover rate and in those particular facilities. So I guess my question for each of you folks is, what do you think the VA should do as far as metrics and dealing with the backlog? As you notice, my first question with the Secretary is, you got a claim that could have several medical conditions, another claim that actually might have 20 or so compared to one that might have 5. Do you think we ought to be looking differently on how we calculate, performance of an employee? In that way, that's a better standard to hold them accountable for it? And I guess I'd ask each one of you if you could do a quick yes or no. Should we do it the way it is done now, or should we focus on medical conditions?
There should be some changes in the way that they do that. And to answer your question a little bit more, if you're counting a claim as a claim, but that contains 8 contentions in that, in past it was, or currently, an error in one of those issues is an error for the claim. If you're going to change that and make that metric, each contention now is worth, where the error is counted in each one of those contentions, but the overall claim isn't. Those are things that they need to be looking at, and I know that the VA is looking at different ways, but in doing so, the employee has to know exactly what it is that, that they're responsible for, or the complexity of it. What I'm getting at is, if you're going to score an employee and you have a senior rater that's getting inherently the more difficult or more complex claims, the special ops claims type issues, I can't see how VA is going to be able to credit their employees or give them credit for their daily workload without changing how they score that.
I'm certainly not the expert on the benefits side, and I'd like to take your question and spend a little time talking to the head of our benefits department about that. But it's my understanding that the VA is looking at, and I think Mr. Hall referenced this, is looking at the way they view a claim. In the past, we've complained in years past about the numbers game associated with claims processing, and finishing a claim is getting a 1 for that. And so that it puts an emphasis on just moving claims quickly, which leads to getting a lot of the easy stuff done quickly and the harder stuff being left behind. And it's my understanding that they're either looking at, or maybe even moving towards, an idea where if a claim has 10 issues in it, each issue is scored individually for credit, either as a positive or a negative. And we think that's probably the right way to go. We've always, I think, sort of argued that made more sense because you've created sort of a disincentive to do the hard work if you're only going to get 1 credit for a 10-issue claim versus 1 credit for a 4-issue claim.
Yes, there needs to be changes. Carl and Jeff pretty well summed it up, so I'll return your time.
Okay. We agree, yes, and the American Legion has actually submitted a comprehensive proposal to the Department of Veteran Affairs just last week, which works almost similarly to a checkbook system where the claims are rated based on the difficulty, and actually negative points are given when the claim is adjudicated improperly.
Could you also provide that to the committee as well?
We'd be happy to.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Mr. Ranking Member. Mr. Walls.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. Thank you all for being here. As always, your service, and most importantly, thank you for being there every minute of the day for decades to make sure we get this right and bring this expertise to it. And I'm grateful in looking at the IV, some of those things, and I know, Mr. Hall, that it's sometimes hard to find the positives in things that are very frustrating, especially in the backlog of claims. But I think it's important that we understand that the outcome is what matters. Effectiveness is what matters. And we've got to look at this. We all want it fixed. And there's a lot of, as I said, I'm glad they're there now. They've recognized this is an issue, and now they want to get it fixed. But we've got to do it in a manner that works. And so I'm very appreciative of you doing that. And I think Mr. Benishek's right. This issue of accountability, I think we all want it. When we figure this out, let us know so we can apply it to this Congress. And then then we'll get things going. But I have a specific question again. This comes out of your critical issues report, and I'm not sure which one of you wants to take this. It's just an issue. It was on on page 27, where it talks about in there, the DoD and VA should act on the recommendations provided in the Institute of Medicine's report to determine and address the long-term health effects resulting from airborne hazards. I'm just concerned we got NEMR claims here on the horizon, if you will, that are going to have to be addressed. Do changes need to be made? Do any of you, if you have an expertise on this, need to be made in the way IOM partners with VA, and if there's enough transparency there? This looks like a pretty solid study. It's one we've been waiting on. It's one we've been looking at, and we're starting to see some implications there. I think that the implications are generational, and we've never crossed that path, and I think we may have to, of what are the implications on the children of these exposures. So I don't know if any of you, are we getting this right? IOM laid out what I think is some solid evidence. Now what's going to happen with it?
No. I think the issue is it's much like any other kind of report. The IOM has done a number of great studies on issues under the umbrella of the VA over the years, and whether those recommendations necessarily see the light of day, I'm not sure. I don't know if that has to do with the connection that exists between VA and IOM. I'd be surprised if anybody could honestly tell you what that connection here actually is. But to the specific report, certainly there's some great ideas there that VA needs to look at. But I think that same statement can be made about a number of things over the years too. So.
And I, of course, worded my question in a very good Minnesota passive-aggressive fashion. I agree with you that I don't think it's being implemented. I don't know if it's going any further, and I have deep concern on numerous ones, but on this one specifically, that I think there's some good research on there. I think we're moving, and the VA is taking a very aggressive approach to addressing whether it was Agent Orange or other things. This seems like one to me that this opened the door for more collaboration, more transparency for us to look at it, and then to do it. I mean, this is a door we haven't, I think we need to go through to see what are the implications genetically on generational impact of exposures to these. So with that, I appreciate again all of you being here, and I really think it's important you're here and with the independent budget, focusing on the whole spectrum of care to our veterans. I think Dr. Rose summed it up right. I don't think any of us have seen the level of services being provided by the VA. Many of them are top quality, best practices, verified, and some of them are not. And I think it's important for us to never lose the focus. If we spend too much energy in one area at the expense of others, then we all know that's detrimental to the veteran. And I know you get that, and I appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Mr. Walz. We're just about out of questions, but Mr. Michaud expressed to ask another question while you're here.
Yep. Just one quick question. I know you support the advance appropriation for all of VA. Would you also support, my biggest concern with just giving budgets on a yearly basis or a two-year basis is the long-term planning. Would you support requiring, if we're going to do advance appropriation for the rest of VA, that they have to provide a 5-year plan to the committee as well? Because I think DOD does that. I'm wondering if you think the VA should do the same thing, long-term planning.
No comment. I think it's a reasonable idea. The federal, when they release the entire federal budget, it's done on a long-term plan. I think a fear would be that we wouldn't want that to set down the benchmarks for the preceding years. If the VA was to project next year and 3 or 4 years beyond that as dollar figures, what we've seen with advance appropriations now that raises some concerns is the VA projects a number for advance appropriations, and very little change occurs in the next year when we're looking at it in that current year format.
No, that's not what I'm asking. It's, for money, I'm talking about a plan. For instance, if you look at the aging population among our veterans, Vietnam veterans, for instance, and you look at the budget, there's actually a decrease in state veterans' homes reimbursement rate. So the long-term plan, 5, 10, 20 years down the road, is there's going to be more need for long-term health care. When you look at 5, 10, 20 years down the road, more of the soldiers coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan that has traumatic brain injury or PTSD, prosthetic issues, probably will increase. I'm not talking about setting a budget to it beyond the 2 years. I'm talking about a plan beyond the 2 years, because that plan, the budget might say, well, we're going to do transformational, and here's what it's going to be for the next 2 years. But the third year out, they plan to have a huge increase in their budget because that's the implementation of it. So I'm not talking about the budget. I'm talking about a plan of where they plan on going.
I would say that VA already does that to some extent, especially with their capital infrastructure, which does take into account where veterans are going to live, how many of them are going to be migrating from one area to another, what specialty needs they may need. And I think they do that. Could it be expanded? Should it be reported? Be happy to discuss that.
I think, go ahead.
No, we're certainly proponents of prior planning, of course. We just wouldn't want to see a situation, as brought up by my colleague, where the tail is wagging the dog, where in future years we need a service or we need some additional support that wasn't in the plan, and then we're now afraid to introduce it because it wasn't pre-thought of.
I'd like to thank you all for being here today. There's going to be further written questions from the committee to you all, and we look forward to those answers. And I personally look forward to you coming to me and bringing forth some of these questions you may not want to testify too much about today. But you're all now excused. I'd like to reiterate my thanks to all today's witnesses, especially Secretary Shinseki, for being with us today, and I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material. And without objection, so ordered. The hearing is now adjourned.